Hey, third grade art friends, it's Mrs. Herbay. We're going to start something new this week, and you guys are going to be working with clay, which is pretty exciting. So what you're going to need is the container that I sent home to you. You're also going to need to grab a piece of, I just used, it's a cereal box that I folded in half, but something like this, either a cracker box or cereal box or a piece of cardboard that kind of serves as a mat for you to work on with the clay. And you're also just going to need a little container with water in it. And I'm going to show you why in a minute. Mine has already some clay in the water, but you just need just a little shallow container with just a tiny little bit of water. And then you're also just going to need the clay tools that I taped to the top of your package. So if you want to go ahead and get that ready, then we'll get started. Alright guys, so we're going to take the lid off of our container. What I think is the easiest is if you just turn this upside down with your hand underneath, then everything kind of falls out. I'm going to put these clay chunks back. I'm going to unwrap your clay. Okay, and then you're going to set it down on your mat. And if there's any edges or things that got a little wonky, you can kind of shape it back together. Okay, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making something called a relief tile. So, and we're going to be using our family again as a reference. We're going to be sort of making a family portrait out of clay, and it's going to be kind of cool. So we've already you guys are already familiar with drawing your family from doing your drawing. So now what I thought would be fun is to create it out of clay. So what you're going to do is, before we get started, you're going to take some, like a couple chunks of clay from your, the chunks of clay that you got underneath your slab, and you're just going to kind of break them apart and put them in here. And then if you just want to use this tongue depressor, kind of squish it, stir it around, get it kind of down into that water. And what's going to happen is it's going to start to dissolve and make sort of like a gray mush. And that gray mush is called slip, and we're going to be using that when we're creating our artwork. All right. So the first thing you want to do is think about a plan. And you can decide, do you want this to look like a picture frame? If you do, you can create a border, and we're going to use the end of our wooden skewer to draw into the clay. So I'm just going to carefully, if you draw something with the skewer and you don't like it, the cool thing is you can just kind of smooth over it and erase it. I'm not pressing very hard at all. So I'm just kind of, it's just lightly, you can see that I got a little off track. I didn't want to do that. Nah. That's better. Okay. So I'm going to go back later. We're going to go back later and talk about the frame decoration. But for right now, that's holding a place for the frame. And then what I'm going to do is similar to what I did when I drew my family portrait. I'm just going to kind of try to figure out the layout, and I'm going to sketch just lightly the head, the neck, and like the shoulder of whoever I'd like to include in my family portrait. So that way it kind of helps you with your spacing. And again, I'm just doing this really lightly and roughly. There's me, then my daughter, and then So I'm just lightly drawing in the heads and the shoulders. Like that. So it kind of figure out the spacing. Okay. And then after you do that, then you can just sort of roughly draw in how the people are going to be. You can see I'm just doing this really roughly. Okay. All right. So go ahead and you're just going to do sort of a light little sketch of everybody that you want to include in your family portrait. And then after we do that, I'll show you the next step. All right, guys. So I have my family roughly sketched in, and you can kind of see where everyone's head is, where everyone's shirt is and shorts and whatnot. And now you might say, well, what about the faces? What about all the other stuff? Well, here's where this is going to get kind of cool. So what you're going to do is, with the extra clay that I gave you, you're going to pinch off little pieces, and you're going to form them into the shapes that you need for the particular areas. So for example, I'm going to do the heads first. So I'm going to kind of see, like, okay, how does that fit on there for my husband's head? It fits pretty good. All right. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my skewer, and I'm just going to, I'm sort of making lines this way and then this way. And then I'm going to stick my finger into this sort of ooey gooey stuff. This is called slip. It's kind of like the glue. And I'm going to put a little bit on the end, on the back of the head, and then a little bit on where I want to stick the head. And then I'm just going to go ahead and then just gently place that head down. And you're going to see a little bit of stuff squish out, and you can kind of use the edge of your finger to kind of smooth that. You can also kind of alter the shape a little bit. I was kind of squeezing it in to kind of make part of the neck. And you can kind of take, the edge of the tongue depressor to also kind of use that to, so I was able to kind of smooth and then create the neck here too, out of that little disc of clay there. So there is my husband's head. Then I'm going to take another piece to make the rectangle for his shirt. So I'm just going to kind of see, Okay. I just need to make it a little bit longer, and you can take, if the clay is a little bit dry, you can kind of add a little bit of, just a tiny little bit of the water. If the piece isn't big enough, you can always add a little more clay to the piece. And just kind of smoothing it. And then I'm just kind of checking, okay, that looks pretty good. And then I might just add a little pinch of clay. On the side for the shirt sleeve. So you can kind of see that. And then I'm just going to take another little pinch of clay. Add it on this side. Kind of see how that looks. Okay, that's pretty good. So, and you can smooth it more once you get it on. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pointed edge of my wooden skewer, and then I'm going to slip and score, and then I'm going to slip and score the back of this. And then I'm going to take some of the ooey gooey stuff, rub it onto the back here, and then I'm going to place this down on the tile. And then once it's down, again, you can use your fingers. You can smooth it more. You can use your tools to kind of shape it. You can press it down a little bit more, like, see, like his arm is going kind of where my arm is right there. If you need, you only want to put, if you're going to put a little bit of water on your finger, you only need a tiny little bit, because you don't want the clay to be really sopping wet. So there, so now I have the shirt part on, and then I'm going to continue working my way down on his body. So then I'm going to make the shorts. So I think I'll do the shorts in 2 parts. I'll do 2 rectangles. So I take, again, just a little pinch of clay. Kind of form my rectangle. If it's a little bit too long, I can kind of cut it off. And then I see, all right, that's pretty good. And then I'll make another one. See how that is. It's maybe a little too wide. And I'll move this up so you can see. So you can take this and just kind of so now we see, okay, that's pretty good. I might just cut off this edge just a little bit more. Okay, so I've got my 2 rectangles for the shorts. So same thing, I'm going to slip and score. And then I'm going to slip and score the back. going to take my little bit of slip, and then I'm going to stick this down. And there we've got one short. And then I'm just going to rough up the back there. I already did that one. Take a little bit of the slip. And there we go. And then again, if you need to smooth, or make some adjustments, you can. Okay. And then let me show you for the legs and the arms, what you can do is you can take a little bit of clay, and then you just want to roll like a thin little coil like this. And then what you can do is after you have the coil, if you just kind of gently pat it, then now you can get, that can kind of help you get a thinner, smaller arm shape. So we've got, it's maybe a little too long, so I'm going to cut that off right there. So there's an arm. And for the hand, same thing. You could take a tiny little piece, roll it into a ball, and then once it's into a ball, you can kind of flatten it and push it together. I'm just going to kind of make it like a little oval shape like that. Okay. So then, now that I have those shapes, I'll pull those off. And same thing, I'm just going to rough up that area, rough up the back of this one, put some of my slip, put some slip in there. It's alright if you get the slip on other stuff too. So there's my arm. If it's too long, I can take a little bit of that off. And then I'm just going to rough up the back of the hand. Rough up where I want the hand. Put a little bit of slip, a little bit of slip. And then, whoop, I'm going to stick it down there. And there we go. Okay, so, and then you're just going to keep going till you work your way down. Now, to the rest of, so then my husband just needs his, and here's another thing. The way it's looking, I don't think, like, he's going to seem like a midget if his legs need to probably be longer. So that's okay. We don't need to see the shoes. So I think I'm going to do a little revision. So for the legs, same thing. I'm going to take a little pinch of clay, and then I'm just going to roll it into a coil like this. Oops. So I've got a sort of a snake here, and then I'm just going to pat it to kind of see if that's like a good size for the leg. And it kind of is. It got a little thin up here, so I'm just going to cut this off. But that's a good leg. And you know what? I'm just going to have everyone, we're not going to be able to see everybody's shoes. It's just going, the picture's going to end like right here. Okay? So then I need to, even though it seems like it's stuck down, I still need to slip and score it. And here's why. Clay has a lot of water in it, and that's what makes it nice and soft. But what happens is when the when the clay dries, the water evaporates and all of the pieces that you stuck together will shrink. And so if you don't sort of rough the surface and use the slip, then what happens is the pieces will come loose, and you don't want that. So then again, I'm just gonna chop that off. So there's my husband's, nearly my whole husband's body. So then what you can do is, after you finish the bodies, then what you can do is you can go back with your skewer and you can add details. So for example, maybe he has an ear here, so I'm going to kind of carve in there with my skewer, and I'm just going to kind of smooth. I'm going to use the non-pointy end of my skewer, just kind of smooth around there. There's kind of his ear. You can also use the edge. And I'm gonna use the pointy end of my skewer to add the hair texture. And then I have two choices that I can do for the face. So I can use the skewer to carve in the details, like how I'm kind of doing right now. Or again, I can use tiny little bits of clay and stick them on. So for example, I can make a little mouth. I'm gonna just rough up the back a little bit. I'm gonna rough up where the mouth is. Just take a tiny little bit of slip. So now I have his mouth on here. So it's raised up. Like that. I can also do it for the nose and the eyes if I wanted to. But it's really tricky because it's so small. So you may not want to do that. You may just want to use your skewer and just draw in your details. Which I think I'm going to do for And again, if you draw it and you don't like it, you can also smooth it out. There's one eye. And he's got an eyebrow. And his other ear. Okay. So, And then you can also use the skewer to, carve in the details of the shirt and stuff. But one thing too that also is sometimes helpful is if you let the clay dry just a little bit and then carve in the details, you don't get quite as many of these little clay boogers like that. So you're just going to keep working your way down. If it takes you, if you work on a couple and then you're like, wow, I don't want to do this anymore for right now, that's perfectly okay. So what I would suggest is just grab a Ziploc bag from your mom and dad's, from the kitchen, and slide this in and just close it up real good, and then let it just chill out for a little bit, or whenever you want to go back and work on it, and then you can go back and it'll keep it nice and moist. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit more and then I'll show you kind of where I am, and then we can wrap things up for this week. Okay, all right guys, so this is about as far as I got. I got my husband done, and I got part of myself done. I just didn't finish the other part of my hair, and now I'm going to move into my kids. So it's a little bit tricky, and it takes a little bit of time to get all the pieces attached. So what I want you to do is do maybe one or two of your family members, depending on. If you want to do more, you can. But when you're ready to stop, what I want you to do is, this is a little bit too big to fit back into the container. So if you just ask your parents for a Ziploc bag, and we're just going to slide it into the Ziploc bag, and you can put a damp paper cloth towel, not maybe wrapped around this, but just underneath this, or in the bag with it, to keep this a little bit moist. And then the cool thing is that you can then get it back out and work on it when you want to. With the extra clay, same thing. Get a paper towel, wrap this extra clay with the paper towel. That will keep it nice and moist. You can even, if your slip container isn't very big, you can slip it into the clay container. Just put the lid on like this, and then it will stay nice and moist, and we can continue working on it next week. Okay? Any questions you have, feel free to send me an email through Canvas. But if not, I will look forward to talking to you guys about this on Friday.